Yes, that's right. I went back to Denmark this summer with my girlfriend because we visited her parents. And while we did a number of the same things, we had a number of new things that we also did. And I'm going to share for you right now because I had a great trip. Now, the first place we got to was Copenhagen. And Copenhagen is great. The rest of Denmark, and I don't like to use the word the rest of Denmark, is also great. But because the plane lands in Copenhagen, we start in Copenhagen. And we started in Copenhagen just like we always start in Copenhagen. We took a harbor cruise, and I love the harbor cruise. After the harbor cruise, yes, I ate a hot dog because that's another thing that I look forward to when I go back to Denmark, is having a hot dog. I also made it a point of having lunch at one of the traditional Copenhagen restaurants that are on one of the side streets, not on the main street, and they serve authentic Danish items. My girlfriend and I split a delicious open-faced sandwich. That is some open-faced sandwich. Then we went to the Museum of Copenhagen, the City of Copenhagen Museum, where they have a lot of exhibits. And this time they had an exhibit of I.B. and Tony, who was this artist who made these snappy illustrations and graphic designs in the 50s and 60s and really loved Copenhagen. And I had no idea that he was such an interesting character. Well, after the museum, we were off on a train to Aarhus, where I got to explore the city. And there's many fascinating museums in Aarhus, including the Resistance Museum. And what I find interesting, because I'm from America, is that Americans has no idea what it's like to be occupied. Geez, no wonder the Danes are so resilient. They had to deal with the Germans for 5 years in World War II while the Germans was trying to occupy their country, did occupy their country. I mean, my goodness, Americans have never had anything like that. The people in our country get annoyed if their nearby Starbucks gets closed. And it was in Aarhus. I had good dinners. One was at the Roodhouse Cafe, where I had a Paris burger beef and fortified us for the next day when we went off to the Den Gamle By. You may not be able to rewrite history, but apparently you can select which periods of history you want to look at. And that is what Den Gamle By has done. They have added a new period of history to the period of histories that they put on display in their open-air museum. 2014 seems too soon to be in the past. It just seemed to happen yesterday, which it really did. Yesterday. What happened to 1994? Apparently a lot of stuff happened there. Apparently Denmark went through some kind of revolution or renaissance. And if you go from 1975 to 2014, you're missing about a quarter of a century. And it's the last quarter of the 20th century, which is very important. Weird, famous, important people like Madonna, Adam Sandler, and Pee Wee Herman. But I know that Denmark went through some sort of renaissance in the last quarter of the 20th century. My girlfriend told me so. She lived in Copenhagen at the time. But Den Gamle By somehow doesn't want to talk about it. What's going on, Den Gamle By? It just doesn't seem right. But I'll tell you what is right. Den Gamle By had a very good lunch, a very good lunch special. It's a traditional platter of Danish food. People say, well, look, if they're serving this kind of food now, the people back then really must have eaten pretty good. Well, let me tell you something. These are the recipes that have survived. In addition, we now have very fresh ingredients, so that the recipes that they have, we are making them with the best quality ingredients, the most tasty ingredients we can possibly make. Now, if you really lived in the 1700s, you probably would not have fresh food, and the stuff that you could eat was probably not even in a recipe book. But if there is a recipe book, it would probably go like this. Oh, what do we have for food tonight, honey? Oh, we have a cow's hoof. Then we were back on a train, and we are off to Aalborg. I had been through Aalborg because my girlfriend's father picks us up at Aalborg to take us to Sæby. as you can tell from this. But I had never visited, I never walked around Aalborg, and this was a chance that I got to have. And I'll tell you something, Aalborg is a great city. Aalborg also has a wonderful harbor front and wonderful old quaint streets and an underground crypt. That's right, it's underground. It was the basement of a friar, a Catholic friar, where they buried people, and they dug it up when they were building something. And then they decided, well, why don't we just make it a museum? So you get in this elevator, you go downstairs, and you get to see the crypt. And her father took us on a drive around Säby and the countryside around the town. And we got to see an exhibit that talked about the value and problems of farm animal manure. Yep. Ironically entitled, Shit or Treasure. And I guess it depends on how you look at it. Is the glass half empty or half full? For me, the glass is half full. Because when we left there, her father dropped us off at a bakery, one of the few independent bakeries in Säby, probably the only one, where they bake some very eclectic pastries, including the elusive slipper. This is the slipper, which is a northern Jutland delicacy.
That's pretty darn good. It is not as sinister as I thought it would be. It's just a good pastry.
My girlfriend doesn't understand why more bakeries in Denmark don't make the slipper. She says the slipper is delicious and should be made available for people to eat. She says it causes her some confusion. I'll tell you what caused me confusion was when we went to the Aalborg airport and I had to confront the signs that they use for advertising, where they have things where it's time for to create memories. And the problem is the two words that start these things, till, frankly, sound the same to me. T-I-D-T-I-L. But they're pronounced till. Though my girlfriend says, no, they sound different. Case in point. Till at scape mina. Time to create memories. Now, first of all, I don't understand why the D becomes another N, why the D becomes a P, but I got that. Okay, that's just the way it is. But this till drives me absolutely nuts. Till. These two words sound exactly the same to me. And I've got to wonder, is there some kind of committee, some kind of super committee that is trying to keep foreigners from learning their language by making the language so confusing? I don't know, but I'll tell you something. And this is to you, super committee, I'm not going to give up. So just be patient with me. We were at the Aalborg airport because we were going back to Copenhagen because we were soon going back to the United States. So I was a little melancholy that the vacation was ending, but I was still excited about seeing Copenhagen for one more day because there was a special thing that I was going to do, a special surprise. I had to go see the Marble Church. Why was this so special? Because the Marble Church last year, in the last couple of years, I could not get up to the top of it. Last year I went and they canceled the tour. Here I am last year. And thank you, Denmark, and thank you to the Marble Church for giving me an existential visit to an existential monument, which was hope and then disappointment. This year I got up and the views were amazing. I got to see the whole of Copenhagen laid out in front of me. It was breathtaking. We also got to go to Bakken, which is the other amusement park in Copenhagen. It's not as famous as Tivoli, but it was just as great. And I got to see a lot of games of chance. The last thing I experienced before we headed back to the United States was at the Copenhagen airport, where I am in the duty-free section of the airport. And going through the duty-free shopping area was a very appropriate thing to do because there's a moral to the story. Because I realized I didn't need all these trinkets, the liquor, the perfume, the candy. I had just had a trip, a fantastic trip to Denmark, Copenhagen. Aarhus, Aalborg, Säby. What more could you possibly want? Thank you kindly.